David Quadrelli, alongside Chris Faber. We're on the drive home from Whistler. We're in Squamish right now. Well, we're past Squamish, but technically we're on the drive home. It's very, very nice behind us, as you can see. I decided to wear a hat today because the last video, people were making comments about my hair, which I will point out, John Shorthouse said he liked. He didn't recognize me at first because he was used to me having long hair, but he said he liked my hair more. So screw you, commenters. How about that?
I do have a problem with the bangs. I think that's what people were getting mad at. So I don't know. That's for another video, I guess.
Yeah, that would be Patreon content. But let's talk about training camp, Chris. Canucks training camp is come and gone. Canucks are going to be scrimmaging tomorrow. What's your main takeaway from 3 days of training camp in Whistler?
Yeah, very excited to get to some preseason games here. They're going to have the double game against the Flames, and that's going to be exciting to kind of see how these lines, how they end up getting split up. Are we going to see the same things that we saw at training camp? I really liked what that fourth line was able to do, man. I really liked the way that Dakota Joshua ends up playing the game, having Curtis Lazar on the same line with him. Two players that love to get involved physically. They're going to be aggressive. I think this fourth line is going to have a really different look to what they're going to be able to do from what we've seen over the past couple of years with the Vancouver Canucks. So I really like that fourth line. Jason Dickinson looks like the center right now, but you could see Curtis Lazar taking faceoffs. And I'll tell you what, Dakota Joshua, he has a 55% win percentage in the faceoff dots in his NHL career as well. So all three of these guys could really take faceoffs. It'll be interesting to see how that line ends up kind of shaping out here and getting an opportunity in the preseason.
One thing we saw that was pretty interesting from that line in scrimmages and drills was Dickinson and Lazar were switching, depending what side the faceoff was on. The right-handed Lazar was taking them on his strong side, and the left-handed Dickinson was taking them on his strong side. So I found that really interesting because obviously those two guys are centers, and obviously Joshua as well, as you just mentioned, can take faceoffs. So there's three guys on that line that can take draws. I know you literally just said that, but I did find that interesting that they were switching based on which side it was on and playing on their strong side. And I know Rob Williams is going to love that I just pointed that out. But other than that line, let's talk about Nils Höglander because he's been talked about a lot. Obviously, he was skating with AHL line mates through all 3 days of camp, but Bruce Boudreau making a point on the second day to say very nice things about Nils Höglander. My question for you, Chris, is it a battle between Jason Dickinson and Nils Höglander for the fourth line, or is Höglander vying for a top 9 spot?
That's what's going to come down to preseason. That's probably the biggest question you can have going out of training camp here is where is Nils Höglander going to play to start the actual regular season? Is it going to be in the NHL? Is it going to be in the AHL? Is it potentially a chance to see him on a fourth line? We just talked about it a little bit. There's all three of those guys can take faceoffs. They can play center for you. So could you see some sort of a mix? I know a lot of people might want to say, hey, maybe you bump down Jason Dickinson and give Höglander an opportunity. I'll tell you what, a trio of Höglander, Lazar, and Joshua would be very aggressive, very exciting. That trio would be something that could be a very different looking fourth line. Not your typical fourth line that you've seen over the NHL for the past 20 years, but this is something that has sneaky offense but also a lot of aggressiveness. It would be a trio I'd like to see. I'm just curious if Boudreau wants to do that or if he really wants that fourth line to kind of have its own type of mentality of going out there and acting like more of a fourth line than maybe somewhat of a scoring line if you had Höglander there. I just find it very difficult to see one of these players in the top 9 being bumped down for Höglander. I think it's going to take an injury. We might see what happens here moving forward, and even today could have given an opportunity for it. Brock Boeser sat out of the final day of training camp today for precautionary reasons. We didn't see Höglander step into that spot. I don't know if it's going to be long-term for Brock Boeser. It doesn't sound like it's going to be long-term. Should expect to see him pretty early in the preseason, but this is the type of situation that opens up the door to play Höglander one of those top 9 lines. Why couldn't he slide in and just play on that line instead of Brock Boeser? He could be with JT Miller and Tanner Pearson. I mean, this is the situation that kind of presents itself and kind of opens up a lot of options with Nils Höglander being a guy who can come in and be that player to play really anywhere in your top 9 when an injury or something else occurs.
Where in the world is Nils Höglander going to play? That's the big question in the preseason. Chris, before we wrap up, 3 days of training camp have come and gone. Heading into the preseason, what's your number one question, other than Nils Höglander, that's going to be answered in the preseason? I'll go first. Mine's where the heck is Mikey DiPietro going to play? This team does not want to have 5 goaltenders in their organization in the AHL and the NHL. They're going to run 2 in each, so maybe an ECHL loan for one of Archer Seelovs or Mikey DiPietro is in the cards, but I'm really curious to see what's going to end up happening with Mikey DiPietro, who, as we've mentioned before, requested a trade out of the organization this past offseason. Jim Rutherford has said that the organization is willing to honor that request. It just sounds like there's not much trade interest right now. So that's my number one, is where the heck is Mikey DiPietro going to end up?
Yeah, I think there's been somewhat interest in Mikey DiPietro. I just don't think the return has been there for the Canucks to actually want to pull the trigger on that. For me, I'm going to be interested to see Quinn Hughes in preseason on the right side. I mean, there was times in the scrimmage where it looked like it did limit him a little bit. He just seems to have much more better puck possession skills when he's on his forehand, and I didn't think it was really going to affect him as much as we saw in the day 2 scrimmage. Apparently looked a little bit better in the 3rd scrimmage there for the Vancouver Canucks when they scrimmaged against each other. I'm curious to see how much we see Quinn Hughes on the right side throughout preseason.
A lot of questions, a lot of answers coming in the coming weeks. David Quadrelli, Chris Faber, here for Canucks Army.